Alien girl felt the human's breath sync with hers, but the tradition she explained was beautiful. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The storm rolled across the fringe outpost like a living thing, rattling loose panels and spraying needles of charged dust against the metal walls. Evan Cole pulled his collar higher as he stepped through the half-collapsed service bay, his handheld scanner flickering under the interference. The air tasted metallic, dry enough to sting the back of his throat. Somewhere under the broken framework came a faint, rhythmic sound, soft, uneven, like someone trying to breathe through a cracked mask. He froze, pulse tight in his ears. The second exhale was clearer, edged with a faint silver mist that drifted through the cold air and shimmered in the beam of his flashlight. Evan crouched, brushing aside a fallen support bar. That was when he saw her. A girl. No, not human, curled against a scorched hull plate, her skin a pale silver blue that reflected the storm's harsh light like a sheet of ice. The hood of her travel cloak was torn, exposing a small breathing mask with a crack running across its side. Each breath she took shuddered out in thin streams of luminescent vapor. She blinked at the sudden glare, her eyes glowing faintly, wary but exhausted. Instinct pulled Evan forward. He lifted the mask gently, checking the crack with numb fingers. Easy, he murmured, keeping his voice calm. Let me help you. She tensed, her breath hitching as if she expected harm rather than aid. For a moment, he thought she might push him back, but she didn't. She only watched his hands. The storm growled overhead, shaking another shower of dust loose. Evan moved carefully, using a patch from his toolkit to seal the split seam on her mask. Not a perfect repair, but enough to keep the airflow stable until they reached shelter. When he pressed the final seal, her breath softened. The silver mist no longer sputtered. She exhaled slowly, a fragile, relieved sound. Her voice, when it came, was barely more than a whisper. You should not touch the breath mask of my kind. Evan paused, confused. Why not? You were suffocating. Her gaze lingered on him, studying, searching, almost unsure. Because where I come from, touching the breath is not casual. It is sacred. He opened his mouth to ask more, but the storm cracked like thunder above them, reminding him they didn't have time for explanations. He slipped an arm behind her shoulders, guiding her up with careful steadiness. Despite her lightness, her breaths came slow and deliberate, every inhale watched by eyes that still shimmered with caution. Let's get you inside, he said, adjusting his grip. We can talk later. She swallowed, her voice soft but certain. You already spoke, human, with your actions. And for a moment, just a moment, the silver mist of her breath drifted toward his, rising warm in the cold air like an unanswered question. The wind softened once they crossed the threshold of the maintenance wing, the heavy storm settling into a distant murmur behind metal walls that still hummed with leftover static. Evan nudged the door closed with his shoulder, careful not to jostle the girl leaning lightly against him. The interior lights flickered once, then steadied into a warm amber that felt almost gentle after the cold outside. She watched everything with those silver blue eyes, alert yet fragile, as if every sound could tip her back into uncertainty. Evan guided her toward the nearest workstation bench, its surface cluttered with scattered tools and half-finished repairs. She eased down without protest, though her breathing remained measured. Each inhale slow, each exhale a soft ribbon of shimmering mist that faded inches from her mask. You are safe here, Evan said quietly, setting his gear aside. This place is old, but it holds together better than it looks. She tilted her head, her voice a low murmur. Human structures always feel loud. They breathe differently. He did not quite know what she meant, but the way she said it made him glance at the walls as if they truly did inhale. What should I call you? He asked. She considered the question, a faint glow passing through the fine lines around her eyes. My name is Saria Lumine, she said. And you are Evan Cole. Not a question, a statement. He blinked. How did you know that? Saria touched the edge of her mask with 2 fingers. Your name was on your emergency beacon. It pulsed through the storm. Your devices speak very loudly. Evan let out a soft breath, half amusement, half surprise. He checked the patched seam on her mask again, ensuring the adhesive held. The glow around the crack had stabilized, but he could still hear a faint whistle inside the air channels. This will get you through the night, he said. But we should get you something better in the morning. The outpost has spare parts, I think. Saria looked down, hands folding into her cloak. You repaired my breath mask, even though you did not know why it matters. Evan shrugged lightly. You were in trouble. That was enough. Her gaze lifted to him, steady and unreadable. She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing something invisible. Evan shifted uncomfortably under the intensity of it. Listen, he said, rubbing a hand across the back of his neck. I did not mean to break any tradition. If touching the mask is sacred, I am sorry if I crossed a line. Saria's breath slowed, the silver mist rising in a gentler rhythm. It is not disrespect, she said softly. It is simply rare. Among my people, one does not touch another's breath path unless trust is already formed. She paused, her voice quieting further. And I do not understand why you would give trust to someone you found in a storm. Evan leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms loosely. Maybe because someone once helped me when they did not have to, he said. Maybe I have been trying to pass that forward ever since. Saria absorbed that answer in silence, her eyes warmer than before. A soft chime rattled through the structure as the heating system kicked in, sending a wave of gentle warmth across the room. She closed her eyes briefly, as if savoring it. Your breath was steady when you worked, she whispered. I noticed it. It felt calm. Evan blinked, unsure how to respond. Is that important? She opened her eyes again, and the lights caught them like polished frost. To my kind, she said, the breath reveals truth. And your truth did not feel dangerous. Outside, the storm rumbled faintly, fading away across the barren plain. Inside, the air grew still, holding. The quiet between them like something delicate that neither dared to disturb. Icy air drifted through the seams of the outpost as the night deepened, settling into a quiet that felt almost thoughtful. Evan adjusted the small space heater until its steady hum filled the room, sending a soft warmth along the metal floor. Saria watched the rising heat waves with a calm, distant expression, as if the glow reminded her of something far from this world. Her posture had changed since he found her. Less guarded, still cautious, but no longer bracing for harm. When she breathed, the silver mist from her mask floated in slow, even ribbons instead of the harsh, panicked bursts from before. Evan leaned on the edge of the table nearby, arms loosely folded. You should try to rest, he said. The storm will last a few more hours. No one is coming through that. Saria ran her fingertips across the side of her patched mask, feeling the faint vibration of the repaired filter. Your storms are loud, she murmured. They fill the air with a kind of electricity that unsettles our senses. Evan nodded. I grew up around them. After a while, you stop hearing the noise. She studied him again, her eyes reflecting the low amber lights. You adapt quickly, she said. Humans do that. He chuckled softly. Some of us. Others complain about everything. A faint smile touched the corner of her mouth, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. She shifted slightly, adjusting her cloak around her shoulders. The material shimmered like cooled metal, catching the light in ripples. You said someone once helped you, she said quietly. Is that why you live out here, where storms swallow the sky and the ground hums with machines? Evan hesitated. He had not expected the question to come back. Something like that, he said. It was after a turbine accident years ago. Someone pulled me out. I never learned their name. They just disappeared into the debris. Since then, I guess helping people feels like the right way to repay it. Saria listened with a stillness that did not feel cold. In my culture, she said, we are taught that every breath given freely becomes part of a greater current. What you describe, it sounds like what we call a carried breath. A kindness that continues beyond the one who began it. Evan, let that sink in, feeling the weight of her words settle gently. Carried breath, he repeated. That is a nice way to think about it. Saria traced the faint seam in her mask's patch again. When you touched this, she said, I felt that current. You were steady, precise. Your breath did not falter. Evan blinked. You keep mentioning my breathing. She nodded once. a tiny gesture that made the lights shimmer across her features. Because it told me who you were more clearly than your words. She lifted her head slightly, listening to the distant rumble of the storm. Among my people, she continued, when two breaths align, even for a moment, it is said that understanding has begun. Only begun, but it is a sacred beginning. Evan felt something shift in the quiet between them, subtle as a change in temperature. Not romantic, not dramatic, just meaningful. He glanced toward the sealed door, then back at her. Well, he said softly, I am glad we started something good then. Saria lowered her gaze, her voice almost a whisper behind the mask. So am I. The heater hummed. The storm softened. And for the first time since he found her in the wreckage, the outpost did not feel empty. Morning crept slowly into the outpost, not with sunlight, but with a softer hum through the walls as the storm finally loosened its grip on the world outside. The air felt clearer, less charged, and the metallic tang that usually lingered after an ion storm had mellowed into something almost gentle. Evan stepped out from the small storage alcove where he had retrieved a new set of tools, rubbing the lingering sleep from his eyes. He had dozed only in fragments, but he felt alert enough. Saria was awake. She sat near the same workstation as before, her posture calm, hands folded lightly over her cloak. The silver-blue tone of her skin seemed a little warmer in the morning light. Her breathing, steady and delicate, drifted in pale ribbons from her repaired mask. When she looked up at him, her expression carried a softness he had not seen the night before. The storm has passed, she said quietly. I can feel it in the air. Evan nodded. Your mask held through the night, but I want to reinforce it before we head to the supply shed. There are adjustable filters. There that should fit your system better. Saria tilted her head, curiosity flickering. You intend to upgrade it? If I can, he said. The storm might have stressed the seams more than we thought. She watched as he set out his tools on the bench, arranging them with movements practiced enough to be almost rhythmic. The way he handled them made something in her expression soften further, as though she recognized intention in every small motion. Humans shape metal with such confidence, Saria murmured. It feels as if your hands speak to the tools. Evan gave a modest shrug. I work with what I have. These outposts do not exactly come with luxury equipment. He lifted the mask's side panel gently, checking the adhesion. Does this feel uncomfortable? She shook her head. Your repair was precise. I have felt far worse from my own people when they were in a hurry. That comment made him pause, looking at her in a quiet, searching way. She lowered her gaze as if the words had escaped unintentionally. To ease the moment, Evan shifted focus back to the repair. Hold still, he said. You will feel the air warm, just a little. He activated a micro-welder, letting the soft golden light flow across the patched seam. The warmth spread gently through the mask, and Saria inhaled in a slow, thoughtful breath. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again with something like calm gratitude. Your breath is steady again, she said softly. Evan blinked, surprised. Again? Yes, she replied. When you work, it has a rhythm. It is grounding. Evan felt the smallest, unexpected warmth bloom in his chest at her words. Not romantic, not dramatic, just human. He cleared his throat lightly. Well, I am glad it helps. Saria studied him as though memorizing the moment. Then she spoke, barely above a whisper. Among my people, when someone tends to another's breath path, it is an act of honor. It means they accept responsibility for the safety of that breath. Evan froze slightly at that, the micro-welder cooling in his hand. I did not know, he said. If I crossed a boundary, she shook her head quickly. No, you did not. The boundary was mine to decide. Her eyes steadied on his, gentle and clear. And I allowed it. The heater clicked in the corner. The outpost settled into a quiet that wrapped around them like a protective shell. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Saria exhaled, her voice soft as drifting light. The current between us has begun to shift. Evan did not know exactly what that meant in her culture, but he understood enough to feel its weight. The walk to the supply shed began with a quiet that felt almost deliberate, as if the world outside the outpost knew their steps needed gentleness. The storm had left the ground coated in a thin layer of frost-like ion dust, each step stirring a faint shimmer that trailed behind them. Evan kept a steady pace, glancing back every so often to make sure Saria was comfortable. She moved lightly across the uneven ground, her cloak catching the pale morning glow with soft metallic ripples. Her breaths formed delicate silver threads in the cold, drifting upward before dissolving. When she spoke, her voice blended with the stillness around them. Your world feels different after a storm, she said. Quieter, as if it is holding its breath. Evan smiled faintly. It is the only time this place looks peaceful. They reached the shed, a squat metal structure partly buried against the hillside. Evan keyed in the manual override, and the door slid open with a long, low hiss. Warm light washed over rows of parts, tools, and replacement systems stacked with the messy practicality of a lone technician. Saria paused just inside the doorway, studying the glow with interest. It smells like metal and heat, she murmured. It feels alive in its own way. Evan chuckled softly. This is where most of my days disappear. Not glamorous, but it keeps the outpost running. He moved toward a shelf lined with filter cartridges and adaptive seals. As he sorted through them, he noticed Saria drifting closer, her gaze following his hands again. You have a habit of watching me work, he said lightly. Saria blinked, not embarrassed but thoughtful. Your movements are precise, and your breath remains steady even when you focus. It is rare to witness that. Evan pulled out a compact filter assembly, turning it in his hands. Does breath really matter that much to your people? She stepped nearer, her tone gentle. Breath is our first language. Words came later. When someone's breath changes, their truth changes with it. Evan paused. And mine. Saria considered him. For a long moment, her eyes reflecting the warm light in soft silver glints. Yours is consistent. Even now, it tells me you are not hiding anything. He swallowed lightly. I am not trying to. She touched the edge of her repaired mask. Most beings tense when I speak of breath. They fear being seen. Evan looked at her, steady and open. Maybe I do not mind being seen. The quiet between them shifted, becoming something gentle and grounding. Saria looked down, the faint ripple of silver light along her skin warming slightly. Then you are unusual among your kind. Evan placed the new filter assembly on the small repair table. Let us make sure you can breathe safely, he said, his voice softer than before. She nodded, stepping closer so he could reach the mask's intake port. As he worked, the warmth of her breath drifted softly against his hands, not touching, just near enough to feel like a presence. Her voice came as a whisper. Your breath stays calm again. Does that matter? Evan asked. Yes, she said quietly. It means this moment is real. The shed hummed gently around them, the metallic scent of new parts mixing with the morning air. And in the stillness, their breaths seemed to settle into a rhythm neither of them forced, as natural as the quiet light between them. Ionic dust drifted lazily across the outpost path as Evan and Saria made their way back from the supply shed, the new filter assembly secured gently against the side of her mask. The morning light was brighter now, a soft pale hue that glinted off the metal structures and cast long, cool shadows across the ground. Saria walked beside him with a steadier rhythm than before, her breathing smoother, the silver mist of each exhale drifting evenly into the cold air. Evan noticed the difference immediately. You sound better, he said quietly. She touched the upgraded filter with light fingers. The flow is more stable now. Your work was careful. Evan gave a small laugh. I try not to break anything important. Saria seemed to accept that answer with a thoughtful nod. As they reached the main entrance of the outpost, the metal doors sliding shut behind them, the warmth inside greeted them like a mild embrace. The interior lights hummed softly, and the faint scent of heated circuits lingered in the air. Saria paused just inside the doorway, taking in the room with a calm, almost reflective gaze. Your shelter breathes differently now, she murmured. It feels calmer. Evan raised an eyebrow. I did not think buildings could have moods. They do, she answered gently. If you are listening. Evan set his tools on the workstation and turned toward her. You mentioned something earlier, he said. That the current between us was shifting. What does that mean? Saria did not answer immediately. She lowered herself into the seat near the bench, her movements graceful, her cloak settling like liquid metal around her. Her hands rested lightly on her knees as she gathered her thoughts. Among my people, she began softly, breath is our measure of truth. When two individuals spend time together, their breaths begin to influence one another. The currents intertwine. It reveals intention, trust, fear, hope. Evan leaned back against the counter, arms folded loosely. And what does mine reveal? She lifted her eyes, meeting his with a steady clarity. Yours holds no deception. It is open. That is rare. He felt a flicker of something warm pass through him, an unfamiliar kind of pride. I am just doing what feels right, he said. It is not complicated. For many, it is, Saria replied. She studied him for a long moment, as though trying to see the shape of something invisible. You repaired my mask with care. You adjusted the filter so the breath path would not strain. You slowed your movements so I would not startle. Every action you take shifts the current. Evan exhaled slowly, trying to understand the weight of what she was describing without overthinking it. Is that a good thing? Saria's eyes softened, the silver blue glow warming slightly. It is significant. She hesitated, as though choosing her next words carefully. When two breaths become familiar with one another, it forms an echo, a resonance. It is not a bond, not yet, but it is the beginning of one. Evan's heartbeat felt louder in his chest for a moment, though he kept his voice even. I did not mean to cross any cultural boundaries. She shook her head. You did not. The boundary is only crossed if both allow it. She paused, then added quietly, and I allowed it. The heater clicked softly across the room, filling the silence with a warm hum. Saria drew a slow breath, her voice softer than the sound of drifting dust. Evan, your breath no longer feels separate from mine. He stood still, not moving, not interrupting, letting the quiet wrap around the moment. Outside, the last traces of the storm faded into stillness, leaving only the gentle echo of their shared breathing in the warm light of the outpost. Ionic dusk settled around the outpost like a quiet veil as evening approached, softening the metallic edges of the structures and casting long amber shadows across the floor. The hum of the heaters blended with the faint whisper of cooling panels, creating a gentle, steady rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat beneath the metal. Evan adjusted the sensor panel near the workstation, checking the power levels as the systems stabilized from the storm's aftermath. Saria sat nearby, her posture calm, her cloak gathered softly around her as she watched him work. The upgraded filter on her mask released smooth, silver breaths that drifted upward like quiet strands of light. For a moment, everything felt still, grounded, peaceful. Then a soft chime echoed through the outpost. A communication alert. Evan turned, surprised. The outpost rarely received transmissions, especially after a storm. He tapped the console, reading the incoming signal. His expression shifted. It is a scanner sweep, he said quietly. A large one. Saria rose slowly, her movements controlled, her eyes sharpening with recognition. What kind of sweep? Long range, Evan answered. Something is searching the region. Wide frequency. Not human. Saria stepped closer, the glow of the display reflecting faintly in her eyes. I know these patterns. They belong to my people. Evan's pulse tightened. Are they looking for you? Saria hesitated, the soft light on her skin dimming slightly. Yes. They would not search this far otherwise. Evan leaned closer to the console. Are you in danger? Her silence answered the question before her words did. If they find me, they will take me back, she said softly. Not to protect me, but to contain me. I left my world without permission. Evan looked at her, trying to read the weight in her voice. Why would they want to contain you? Saria held his gaze for a long, quiet moment. Because I carry knowledge they fear. And because I chose to leave instead of obey. The air between them felt different now, thicker with something unspoken. Evan moved to the window slit, checking the horizon. The light outside was fading into a muted gray. No ships were visible, but the scanner sweep pulsed again, low and steady. If they get close enough, he said, the sweep will detect your breath signature, even with the upgraded filter. Saria nodded. Yes, our breath carries unique resonance. Evan took a slow breath himself, steadying his thoughts. We can mask it, he said. I can reroute the airflow in the auxiliary chamber. It is not perfect, but it will scatter the readings long enough for the sweep to pass. Saria watched him carefully. You would do that? Of course, he said. I am not letting anyone take you somewhere you do not want to be. Her breath softened, the silver mist drifting slowly. Evan, if you help me hide, you take on my burden. My people do not forgive defiance. He stepped closer, close enough for their breaths to mingle faintly in the warm air of the outpost. "You told me the boundary is only crossed if both allow it," he said quietly. "I am choosing to cross it." Saria's eyes shimmered with something deep and unguarded. "Your breath carries no fear," she whispered. "Not for me." "Then let us protect yours," Evan replied. "Come on. The scan will sweep this area in minutes." She followed him toward the auxiliary chamber, her breath steady, her steps light, their movements guided by a silent understanding neither of them had dared to name. The outpost lights dimmed slightly as the next pulse of the scanner vibrated through the air, searching, probing, drawing closer. Together, they disappeared into the warm glow of the chamber, where the current of their shared breath waited in the quiet darkness. The auxiliary chamber hummed softly as Evan sealed the door behind them, the sound folding into the warm, low thrum of redirected airflow. Dim amber lights traced faint lines along the walls, casting gentle reflections on Saria's silver-blue skin. The air inside felt denser, almost padded, designed to muffle signatures and confuse scanners. Saria stepped closer to the center of the chamber, her breaths forming slow, luminescent threads that drifted upward before dispersing into the redirected currents. She touched the side of her upgraded mask, listening, sensing. "The sweep is nearing," she whispered. "I can feel its resonance through the floor." Evan adjusted the control panel on the wall, redirecting more airflow toward the vents overhead. "This should scatter the pattern. It is not perfect, but it will hide your presence long enough for the scan to pass." Saria watched him with a gaze that held both gratitude and something deeper, something unspoken. "Your willingness to do this," she said softly. "It carries a weight you may not understand." Evan looked back at her. "You do not deserve to be taken somewhere against your will. That is all the understanding I need." She stepped a little closer, her cloak brushing lightly against the floor, her breathing calm and even. "Among my people," she said quietly, "those who defy the ruling currents are seen as dangerous. My leaving was considered an act of dissonance." Evan tilted his head slightly. "Dissonance? It means I refuse the path chosen for me," she explained. "I was meant to join the circle of wind, a place where breath is studied, measured, controlled. But I felt confined." Her eyes lowered for a moment, silver lashes catching the warm light. "I wanted to choose my own path, my own rhythm." Evan felt something shift in his chest at her words, a quiet understanding settling into place. "And now they want to bring you back." "Yes," Saria said, "to correct my course." The chamber lights dimmed slightly as another pulse from the scanner vibrated through the walls, a low, distant echo that made the air tremble. Evan steadied the controls, watching the readings fluctuate. "The masking field is holding," he said. "We just have to stay quiet." Saria moved closer, standing beside him as the soft hum of the vents swirled their breaths into a shared current. She lowered her voice to a near whisper. "In my world," she said, "when someone shields another's breath from harm, it is considered a vow, not of romance, not of duty, but of alignment, a promise that their rhythms are shared." Evan turned toward her slowly, the quiet weight of her words settling between them like a suspended thread. "And what does that mean for us?" Saria lifted her gaze, her eyes glowing softly. "It means we are no longer strangers to the same air." The next pulse from the scanner rolled across the outpost, stronger this time, a deep vibration through the metal floor. The lights flickered, then steadied. Saria instinctively stepped closer to Evan, as though proximity anchored her against the tremor. Her breath drifted near his shoulder, warm and soft in the dim light. Evan lowered his voice. "We will get through this." "I know," she whispered, "because your breath does not waver." The scanner pulse passed. Another followed. Both weakened. Evan checked the console, exhaling slowly. "It is working. They are moving on." Relief softened Saria's posture, her breath flowing in a calmer rhythm. "Then the current holds," she said. "For now." Evan met her gaze, the faint shimmer of shared air lingering between them. "For as long as it needs to." Outside the chamber, the world quieted once more, leaving only the soft, intertwined rhythm of two breaths learning to echo each other in the warm shadows. The auxiliary chamber settled into a deep stillness once the final ripple of the scanner faded into the distance. The walls, moments before trembling with the sweep's resonance, now stood steady and quiet, holding only the soft hum of redirected airflow. Evan exhaled slowly, letting the tension ease from his shoulders. Saria remained close beside him, her posture still, her gaze lifted slightly, as if listening to something beyond the chamber's walls. The silver mist of her breath drifted upward in gentle curls. "It is gone," she whispered. "The search has moved past us." Evan checked the readings on the console, the numbers stabilizing in a calm rhythm. "We should be safe for now," he said. Saria turned toward him, the amber lights catching faint warm patterns along her skin. "You masked my breath path," she said softly. "You took on the danger as if it were your own." Evan met her gaze, steady. "I told you. No one was going to take you anywhere you do not want to go." Her expression shifted, not quite surprise, not quite relief, but something deeper. A quiet recognition. She stepped toward him, close enough that the soft warmth of her breath brushed the air between them. "In my culture," she said, her voice low and clear, "when someone protects another's breath, it forms a binding truth. It is a moment that cannot be undone." Evan felt the weight of her words settle gently, not like pressure, but like meaning. "What truth did we just make?" he asked. Saria lifted her hand, hovering it near her mask without touching. "That our breaths aligned without fear," she said. "That you stood with me when I had no one else. That the current between us has chosen its direction." She paused, her eyes softening. "That is not a small truth." Evan let out a slow breath, steady, deliberate. "Then I guess we share it." She studied him as if memorizing the shape of his breath, the way his chest rose and fell in the warm air. "Among my people," she continued, "shared breath is not a promise of future or fate. It is a recognition of the present. It means, I see you, as you are." Her voice softened further. "And you saw me, not as a fugitive, not as an obligation, but as myself." Evan stepped closer, not touching, just near enough for their breaths to mingle again, warm and calm in the quiet chamber. "I saw someone who deserved a choice," he said. "Everyone does." The lights dimmed slightly as the auxiliary systems powered down, their purpose completed. The chamber exhaled a soft sigh of redirected air, like a final release of tension. Saria lifted her face slightly, the glow of the lights reflecting in her eyes. "Your world," she murmured, "has harsh storms and loud machines. But your breath," she hesitated, the words fragile and sincere. "Your breath is gentle." Evan did not speak. He did not need to. His quiet presence answered for him, steady and open. Saria took one more slow inhale, the silver mist of her exhale drifting into the air between them. "In my culture," she whispered, "when two breaths meet in calm after danger, it means they have found understanding." Evan let the silence hold the moment, warm and unbroken. Outside, the last traces of the scanner sweep dissolved into the fading dusk. Inside the chamber, two breaths settled into a shared, quiet rhythm, steady and undeniable. And in that stillness, understanding did not need a single word.